Today I will be showing you how to match supply with demand in FlexSim. In a warehouse setting, supply is the stock and demand are the orders or picks to process. For this model, I've mainly used the process flow, which consists of three elements, and the model for product creation and visualization. So let's dive into it. So let's zoom into the product creation first. In the product creation, I've created a schedule source with very standard default settings. It has an offset time of 0 and it will create in one go 19 tokens that will be moved to the next step. So the next step is to create an actual object, in this case, a yellow box, with a quantity of 1, meaning each token that arrives, and we have 19 tokens, will create one yellow box. The boxes will be created in the model, which is very generic, but we will specify where they will be created at a later point. And they will be assigned to the token with the item label, which is an important aspect and which is something that is done by default in FlexSim. So next step is that the yellow object is moved. Notice that in this case, in this step, the box is actually referred to with their token label, which is the item label. So this is why the previous step was important. And now we specify the destination, which is the yellow products rack, which we've created in the model. As you can see, we have a yellow products rack and we can sample the rack in the model. So you are sure that it will point to that direction. And as a last step, we will push the created tokens to the stock list. The stock list that is referenced is the stock yellow area list, which is below. What is being pushed is the token. It's assigned to the puller label, which is also a default setting. And we've sampled the list. Let me do it again so that we know with the blue line that this is the list that it will point towards. So if we start the simulation, we see immediately when I start the simulation, products popping up in the rack. That's because we haven't created any movement. It's just logic that creates these items in the rack. And we see 19 entries in the stock list. And what we see here, if we select the individual token, is that the item that is referenced to is the very specific box in the rack. So this is used later on when picking. The operator needs to know which exact box they need to pick, and this is what is being used at that point. Next, we will zoom into creating the pick list. So here again, I have a schedule source with an offset time of 0, one arrival, which creates 10 tokens, which represent, each of them represents one pick, so 10 picks in total. These are then pushed to the yellow picks list. So this list is referenced again by the blue line. The value that is being pushed is the entire token, and it is assigned to the puller token as the default. So if we run the simulation, straight away it creates 10 tokens, pushing all 10 of them to the list. And These tokens, since we didn't add any labels, don't contain any other information than just their ID. Finally, we're zooming in to joining the picks with the stock by creating the pick process. So here again, I have a schedule source. In this case, it has an offset time of 20, which is done because we want to finish the stock creation and the pick list creation before the operator starts picking. It creates one arrival with a quantity of 1. The next step is to pull from the yellow pick list, basically asking, okay, what do I need to pick? And the list reference is the yellow pick list, which we created over here. We request 3 tokens or list entries, I have to say, list entries, and we require 1. So that's the minimum we want to pull from the list, and but we would like to have 3. We're assigning it to a token with a pick label so that we can recognize it as being pulled from the pick list. And all other settings are default. Next, we're pulling. With that same token, we're pulling from the yellow stock list. So this one we create over here. And we can see with the blue line, it is pulling from this list because it's referencing to this list. And the number that we want to pull from the yellow stock list is the same number that we just pulled from the pick list. So remember, we gave that the label token.pick, the pick label, and we're adding dot length to that. So whatever length, whatever quantity of list entries we've managed to pull in the previous step, that's the number of entries from the stock list that we want to pull from this list. And we require 1. So this one we're assigning to a token with a label pulled stock so that we can recognize it again. And the rest is default. And before we go any further, let me run the simulation so that we can see how the token behaves. So after the offset time of 20, as you can see here, the entry time into the simulation is 20. A token is created. Next step is the pull step, pulling from the pick list. And when we see it moving to the next step, we see it has pulled an array of 3 IDs, or 3 picks, if you will, with ID 1, 2, and 3. So these have been pulled from the pick list. And remember, we said we would request to have 3. And because we have 10 on the list, it should be possible to pull 3. So this is as expected. Next step is we run a subflow called subflow load. A subflow is a way to loop through an array and perform an action on each individual element of the array. So the subflow has a destination, and which is always start. Doesn't do anything, just triggers the start of the subflow loop. It has a quantity. In this case, we want the amount of pulled stock items, the length of it, to loop through the subflow. And in this case, remember we've pulled 3 because that's what we've requested. and what we've received. So the length will be the amount, the array length of the pooled stock label, which is 3 in this case. The subflow runs the tokens one at a time. The parent label can be read, and the labels are copied to the children. We're also assigning a new label to the children that are created. So the children are the subflow tokens that loop through the subflow, which is the label called box. And the value of that label is the token with the pooled stock label for each creation rank for each item. So this might be a little bit difficult to understand, but basically this refers to the 3 boxes that have received the label item, and each of them have an array value of 1, 2, and 3 when we pull it from the stock list. So this is a way to rename this pretty long value to a more simpler value called box. And we do that for each child token that runs through this subflow. So by their creation rank, so child token 1, 2, and 3, each of them get a label called box. So if we look at the subflow, like I mentioned, we have a start step, we have a load step. The executor of the load step will be the operator. If you can recall, you may have spotted her already. So this is the operator. We've sampled her in the load step. So the model knows this is the executor that needs to be doing this activity. The item that we want to load is the token that now has the box label, like I've explained before. And the station that we want the operator to load from is the yellow products rack. This is where the items that should be loaded can be found. And finally, there's a finish step, which has just the default settings. Once the subflow is completed, so it has looped through it, in this case 3 times, next step on the main process is the travel activity. So we've pulled the stock, we've picked the stock and from the rack, and now we need the operator to bring it towards another location. So the executor of this step again is the operator, and the destination is the yellow queue, which is over here. So this is where we want the items to ultimately be unloaded, but first the operator has to travel to it. And then we run another subflow because remember, we're carrying with us now 3 items, which we need to unload one by one. So for this, again, we're running a subflow, which is now called unload. The destination again is the start activity. It then unloads. The operator is the executor. What it will unload is the token with the box label, and it will unload on the queue yellow. And after that, it will finish and will loop as many times as we've specified in the subflow that it should loop. All right, so now that we've explained that, let me run the model to see if it works out. So I'm running the simulation. The products are created and the pick list is also created because that's happening straight away. Nothing is happening here yet because remember we have an offset time of 20. So now we've run the simulation. We're at time 22 and the token has moved towards a few steps already. It has pulled from the pick list, it has pulled from the stock list, and it has started on the first subflow called load. Here you see the arrays from the pulled items. And here you see the token. So what it does now is that it is starting to pick the first item from the pooled stock with ID 11, and that token ID is referencing to the first yellow box. So it was the first item that was created in the source. It has token ID 11 and it referenced to this item that we saw in our subflow as well. And we have a puller ID, which is the token that has pulled the item from the list, which indeed has ID 30. So this is the first item that the operator will start to pick. So now she starts to load the second item and the third one, and she will travel. And next she will unload it. So first box to unload is the first box that has been picked. And she will proceed picking the items. And notice that this is now the third time it loops that she has up until now picked 3 items because each time, because we said we request 3 items. We require 1, but we request 3. And because we have 10 picks on the list, we should be able to pull 3 items at once. But you can do that only 3 times. At that point, you've picked 9. So now she has picked 9. So there was only 1 pick left on the list. There's more stock. We've created 19 boxes, but there was only 1 pick left on the list. So she will retrieve the last item because we said, well, we require 1, at least 1. This was the 10th item. Now, at this point, the token starts again. So didn't explicitly mention it, but at the end of the unload, we have this arrow pointing to the beginning of this process, starting it all over again. And the first step is to pull from the pick list yellow, but we don't have any more picks left because we've all done them. So this is how you create stock picks and match those picks with your items that you have in stock.